Today, we are here to honor the life of Jim Whelan. Senator Jim Whelan did leave us fast. If you knew Jim, you knew he didn't want to burden anyone with a long illness. Abraham Lincoln once said, in the end, it's not the years in your life that count, it's a life in your years. He gave us so much of his life to public service, serving as a teacher, a councilman, as mayor, and for more than a decade in the legislature, fighting for the policies to help improve the lives of the residents of the state of New Jersey. Jim Whelan swore me in as mayor in Northfield in 2007, and then again in 2011. Now, in Northfield, it was majority Republicans then, and I won as a Democrat. So Jim Whelan, I ran unopposed that year in 2011. And Jim Whelan, before he swore me in, he pulled me out in the hallway, and he said, you know, he put his arm around me, and nobody ever looked down at Jim Whelan. You always looked up. And he said, how did you get a free pass? And I said, I guess the Republicans are scared of me. And he looks down, he says, I don't think so. He was right. Jim Whelan was a great swimmer. He loved to swim, but he also taught many to swim. I had the privilege of being at many events in Atlantic City with Senator Whelan. There would always be someone who would say, hey, Mr. Whelan, you taught me how to swim. I knew he enjoyed the shout-outs. You know, a lot of people might not know Jim, but Jim had a pretty good sense of humor. Jim would have a daily swim workout in the Intercoastal outside his house in AC to Ventnor. It was about a 1 mile round trip swim. When he's about halfway there, he would, rest a little bit. He'd see if anybody was on the bulkheads, and he'd yell out, hey, is this Brigantine? And everybody would say, no, you got to go north. He says, okay, thanks, and he swam back home. Yes, the legacy of Jim Whelan will continue to be with us for decades. The tunnel connector, the walk, and his many legislative accomplishments. Jim Whelan didn't care about the fanfare of being a state senator. He just wanted to help and do the right thing. And most of all, he loved Atlantic City. Jim will be missed, that is true. I had the privilege of working with Jim for the last 4 years. I will always be grateful for his wisdom and his friendship. He would want us all to carry on and live by his one rule, which is to show up, do your job, and be nice to people. To his wife, Kathy, son, Richard, and his entire family, my deepest condolences. The state of New Jersey is a better place because of Jim Whelan. Thank you. We are honored to have with us a number of distinguished individuals who Jim shared many memories with, Jim in his personal and political life. Each will regale us with stories about Jim and the impact he had on their lives. As a note to the program you have on your seats, Congressman Bill Pascrell sends his regrets he is not able to make it today. Because of the Hurricane Irma, votes in the House of Representatives were rescheduled today, preventing him from being here. Congressman Pascrell sends his deepest condolences to the Whelan family and all those in attendance. I am pleased to introduce to our first speaker a friend of Jim's going back to his days as mayor of Atlantic City and his days as mayor of the city of Philadelphia, former Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell.
Good morning. Let me begin by saying how honored I am to have been invited to speak at this memorial service in honor of someone who was a great public servant, but more importantly, a great guy. Let me begin by saying that unfortunately I have to leave right after I speak, but Jim would understand because I have to get back and join a meeting that's talking about the 2018 election in Pennsylvania. When I heard that Jim had passed, I thought about a day in 2004 down in Longport. Bill Gormley, Senator Gormley, had challenged Pennsylvanians who came to the shore, to a 3-on-3 basketball game. And we sold tickets, and the tickets went to some charity. And the game was played on the Longport basketball court next to the tennis courts. And Republicans fielded 3 players. I think Bill Gormley brought in a guy who played pro basketball. And the Democrats were myself, Lou Katz, who many of you will remember, and Dan Dalton, who at that time I think was Secretary of State. And Jim was there watching us play. And after about 3 or 4 minutes, Dan Dalton went up for a shot, lost his balance when he was in the air, came down and put his right arm out to break his fall. He broke his fall, but he also broke his wrist. So Dan obviously couldn't continue playing. And we Democrats were down to 2 players, but we looked around and saw this 6'6" guy and say, "Jim, come on, join us." And Jim said, "I'm no good." I said, "Well, we need a 3rd man anyway." Jim always told the truth. He was no good. 6'6", he couldn't jump a lick, and he gave new meaning to the definition, the basketball definition of the word brick. But one thing he did, and you'd all who knew Jim wouldn't surprise you. He dove, and the court was concrete. He dove for every loose ball. He hustled his rear end off. He gave 100% effort all the time in a pickup game. And because of Jim, we got beat a little less badly than we should have gotten beat. But I think this guy that Bill Gormley brought in played for the Lakers. He told us he was a state senator from North Jersey. What do we know about North Jersey? But you know, I heard in the opening prayer, Jim referred to as senator. And I guess that's the protocol, but my guess is Jim would prefer being referred to as mayor. I met Jim when we were both mayors. We served during many of the same years as mayors of Atlantic City and Philadelphia, and we developed a strong bond and kinship. Jim went on to spend 32 years as an elected official. I only spent 24. But I had the opportunity to help Jim in his capacity as president of the New Jersey Conference of Mayors, and I helped him in his electoral runs, and we became great friends. But I know that he would have wanted to be referred to as mayor. I say all the time back home, if you woke me up at 3 in the morning and put a flashlight in my eyes and said, "Who are you?" I wouldn't follow protocol and say the highest office governor. I'd say Mayor Rendell. And mayor, as mayor of a city, and I know Mayor Guardian feels the same way, you develop a bond and a kinship with the people you serve. And when you're a successful mayor like Jim was, people start to believe in your city that you can take care of any problem. The same thing happened to me. Thanks to the men and women who worked with me, we had tremendous success in my time as mayor in Philadelphia. And by the 7th or 8th year I was mayor, I said, if people heard on the news that a meteor was coming down from space and was going to crash right in the middle of Philadelphia, destroying the city, nobody would be worried. They'd say, "Oh, Mayor Rendell will find a way to stop the meteor." And the same was true of Jim. He was a great public servant. People always ask me, what makes a great leader in government? And really, there are 3 components. You have to have vision. You have to have a dream of where you want to take the city or the state that you represent. You have to have the ability to communicate your vision to legislators, to the public. And Jim spoke in a way that was so simple and so direct that even every citizen could understand what he wanted to do and where he wanted to take Atlantic City or his district. And lastly, you have to have the courage to hang in there and to follow your vision, even when things aren't going well, even when they're not popular, to take the slings and arrows, to take the risks that are necessary. We made this country great because we were a nation of risk takers. The founding fathers put their lives on the line and their fortunes on the line to try to defeat the British Army and Navy, which were the greatest fighting force in the world at that time. We were the ultimate risk takers. And our leaders today have to follow Jim's example and be willing to take risks, be willing to put things on the line to move progress forward. Jim was a great, great public servant. The famous UCLA basketball coach, John Wooden, said once that you can't live a perfect day without doing something for someone who will never be able to repay you. By that measure, Jim Whelan lived thousands and thousands and thousands of perfect days. He did things for people who barely knew his name. He made life better for residents of Atlantic City, residents of South Jersey. Some of them knew what he did, most of them didn't. But Jim Whelan lived a lot of perfect days.
The name William J. Hughes, Sr. resonates with everyone who grew up in Atlantic County over the past 30 or 40 years. A former congressman who represented our district for over 20 years and a former U.S. ambassador during the Clinton administration, Ambassador Hughes was a political mentor for Jim for many years. Please welcome Ambassador Bill Hughes, Sr.
Good morning, all. I am truly honored to have been asked to participate in this memorial service as we remember the life and legacy of our good friend, Jim Whelan. I'm particularly honored to be part of this most distinguished group that are here on the dais to honor him today. Since there are now 13 speakers, I hope that you have a good seat, because we'll try to take it easy on you. Speaking of Jim Whelan, he was truly a giant among us. A champion swimmer and lifeguard, an outstanding coach, educator, mentor, and role model, a loving family man, and finally, last but not least, a truly great public servant. I imagine one of his great jobs was being mayor of the city of Ocean City, along with the senator, because you're so close to the people and you bond with the people of Atlantic City, which reminds me of a story. When I was in Congress, I would conduct town hall meetings around the state, and I was over in Steve Sweeney's area in Gloucester County, in Glassboro, and I was talking to them about the issues of the day. And this lady got up and she said, Congressman, they pick up my trash on Thursdays. And invariably, they don't pick it up. And the dogs get in it, and it's a mess. What can you do about it? And I said, well, you know, madam, I'm at the federal level. You know, I don't pick up trash, but I suggest you call your mayor. And she said, well, I didn't want to start that high. Jim is a councilman, mayor of Atlantic City, state assemblyman, and more recently as your state senator, displayed all the traits that made him extraordinarily successful. Jim was first and foremost a wonderfully kind, compassionate, and loving human being. That's above all. He was a so considerate of everyone he respected, even those that he disagreed with. Jim was dedicated and principled while being practical. He knew the role of compromise in the legislative process, and without it, nothing gets done. He was very hardworking, and above all, he was tolerant and of the views of others and always, always civil. Jim worked across the aisle in a bipartisan way to benefit his legislative district and the people of the state of New Jersey. He's being honored actually in November at Stockton University for just that, his civility in public service. It is not only that civility that's often lacking today, not only in politics, but also within the body politic today, that it poisons our political process and hijacks our public discourse. He worked hard to address it. And part of our responsibility is to continue that legacy. We were political allies and often campaigned together in Atlantic City. When it was time to quit, Jim always said, well, why don't we do one more event or visit one more senior high-rise? It is that compulsive feeling that seems to become part of an office holder's political life during campaign season and off campaign season. You feel that you haven't done enough for your constituency. He was looking forward to doing more with just his beloved Kathy and his family. He exemplified the best in public service, and his legacy as a visionary and builder will live on forever. We are all better because he passed our way. Indeed, we all shall miss his leadership and exemplary community service. By any measure one might consider, Jim had a full, satisfying, and productive life. He made a difference in the lives of all that he touched. I want to express my deepest sympathy to Kathy, to Richie, his sisters, their family, as well as to the communities that he served for so many years so well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Governor Jim Florio was always a strong supporter of the city of Atlantic City and Jim Whelan. And when Whelan was mayor and Florio was governor, the two worked hand in hand to grow Atlantic City into the destination place that it is today. Please welcome former New Jersey Governor Jim Florio.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. This is an impressive gathering, but not a surprising gathering, because Jim really touched so many people's lives. It's not surprising that we had this massive turnout. Jim's style was understated. He was an extremely modest person, and modesty is not one of the traits that you usually associate with politics. But he was unique in that respect, and unique in a whole lot of other respects. He had a life of public concern, a life of public service, public commitment, whether it be as a lifeguard, a teacher, a mayor, an assemblyman, a senator. He touched all aspects of political life, and he touched it well. He and I had lots of private conversations over the years, and I always enjoyed them because they were always very thoughtful. One of the things we did from time to time is just compare experiences with regard to government, good experiences and bad experiences, talking about good government and bad government. And he had the view that government was not inherently good or inherently bad. Rather, it was a tool for making decisions. And that tool in the hand of people of good faith, people who wanted to do the right thing, could be extremely important for our whole society. And the areas that we focused upon were very important to most people. I'm really very appreciative of the experiences that I had with him. And I always admired his ability to bring his teaching skills to the public debate, talking to people about how we should think about the long term rather than the short term. We were always talking about making the distinction between public opinion, which is a snapshot in time, impressions, and contrasting that with trying to get people to come to public judgment. We should think about the long term. thinking about analyzing information, not making snap decisions, thinking about how we had to think about things with a greater degree of depth. Depth is what Jim brought to the table, always thinking about the longer term. So I think we could reinforce the importance of his life by trying to evaluate the standards that he met and trying to emulate them ourselves. Hopefully, we will never forget the lessons that he taught to us. Thank you.
A friend, colleague, Senate President Steve Sweeney and Jim tackled the big decisions together. Together they worked to bring continued success to Atlantic City. We know Senator Sweeney will continue to care for Atlantic City even in Jim's absence. Please welcome Senate President Steve Sweeney.
Good morning, or I guess good afternoon to Kathy and Rich. This is very hard for me to be here to do this today, because Jim was a dear friend and a confidant that when you were dealing with tough issues, you knew you could call him because of his experience as mayor. And I really do believe, as Governor Rendell said, he would probably prefer to be called Mayor Whelan rather than Senator, because everything about Jim was Atlantic City. Whenever you talked to him, it was about Atlantic City and how we were going to improve the quality of life. And no, he wasn't the greatest mayor of Atlantic City because he didn't go to jail, okay? We used to tease him about that, but it's just because, look, vision. You're hearing similar terms: vision, humility, kindness. He's just a good guy. They cared a whole lot and wanted to give back to his community and wanted to make this place better. And I got to tell you, Republican, Democrats, I know we are all together in the way we felt about Jim. Jim wasn't, in politics, Jim wasn't a politician. Jim was just a good guy. They cared sometimes way more than others cared about things than he did. But, Kathy, I don't have a whole lot of funny stories because I'm sad. So we should remember him for the great man that he was. Ray Lesniak called me up and he said, "Hey, I got a great idea." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Let's name Boardwalk Hall after Jim Whelan." And I couldn't think of a better honor. The only problem is we're going to have to talk to you because we got to figure it's going to be mayor or senator, because he deserves the honor. This building, this city is so much better off, and this state is so much better off because Jim Whelan served it. Thank you.
Thank you. As anyone who works serves in the legislature knows the deep respect in which Speaker Joe Roberts' name is spoke. When Jim entered the State Assembly, Speaker Roberts was a mentor and a friend. Years later, even after Jim left the Assembly and Speaker Roberts retired, the two remained good friends. We're proud to welcome back to Atlantic City former Assembly Speaker Joe Roberts.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Let me begin with my condolences to Kathy and Rich and everyone in the family, and to thank them personally for giving me the honor of being part of this memorial today. It's an honor to join this tribute to my friend Jim Whelan. Like all of you, I can't believe that we are without him, but this admittedly bittersweet memorial is a chance to celebrate what made him very special to all of us. About 30 or 35 years ago, when I was getting to know Jim through politics, I had the occasion to see him in a different setting, at a restaurant I owned at the time in Sea Isle City. We were doing a reunion of the St. Francis de Sales parish at the time. As I spent time with him that night, one person after another came up to him to say hello. By then, I knew Jim well from the great work he was doing here in Atlantic City, but these were people who grew up with him, who knew him when he was a kid, went to grammar school with him, went to high school with him, and Even though he's making quite a name for him in Atlantic City, almost every one of his old friends said, "Jim, you haven't changed a bit. You're the same guy you always were." And they meant that in a good way. He is someone who was authentic back in the day and was certainly authentic through his whole life. I've learned over the years that if you want to really find out about somebody, talk to the people that have known them the longest. Talk to the people who have known them the best. Jim Whelan didn't disappoint the people he grew up with, and he's never disappointed any of us either. I got to know Jim fairly well through the 90s when he served as mayor of this great city. I marveled as he navigated through the Monopoly board cast of characters who were in Atlantic City in those days. His unquestioned integrity, as he balanced so many competing interests, and the city really thrived during his time there. In 2001, when the city moved to partisan elections and Jim ran as an independent, I had the interesting job, thanks to Governor McGreevey, of serving as the Democratic state chairman. I remember being summoned to a meeting in Atlantic City with the Democrats who said, in essence, "Listen, we know Jim Whelan's a good buddy of yours, and we don't think we're going to get a fair shake with you as the state chairman." I told them at the time that the Democratic Party would support the Democratic candidate, but if they thought I was going to say a single bad word about Jim Whelan, they were mistaken. What they didn't realize was there wasn't a single bad word you could say about him. We were reunited 4 years later when Jim and Damon ran for the Assembly. They both worked really hard, raised a record amount of money, but fell a bit short. But at least Jim got to go to Trenton to begin his amazing career there. His journey of public service really began on the lifeguard stand, and it never stopped. When Jim began his time in the legislature, an extension of his show up and do the job approach was his unbelievable loyalty. He was an incredibly independent person, but also a very loyal person. He was completely committed to his colleagues and said to me 100 times, "Just tell me what we're doing." And I'm sure that Steve Sweeney would attest to that in terms of his loyalty and his commitment. One of very few occasions, very few, when Jim was presented with one of our questionably great plans, he would say, "Let me think about it." That was his code for, "Let me talk to Kathy and see if she thinks your idea is as crazy as I do." To my great benefit, Kathy usually looked out for me and helped nudge Jim over the finish line, do what I thought was the right thing at the time. During his time in Trenton, Jim added to his responsibilities in Atlantic City by looking out for all of New Jersey. He has a long list of achievements, but one of his favorites and mine was his law to provide real choices for senior citizens so that they could stay in their homes with dignity and get the health care they needed to live quality lives. That helped so many people all over our state. In reality, though, we should not just be impressed by what Jim did, but by how he lived his life. It was a life of love and respect. The love he had for Kathy, fully returned measure for measure. What a beautiful love affair. What a true partnership. And the respectful way he treated everyone. If you were a casino big shot or a guy at the sub shop, it didn't matter. If you were a Trenton colleague or a kid at the high school who needed some extra help, you were the same in Jim's eyes. The foundation for this life well lived came early. The character he developed when he was young guided him all the way through. The people at St. Francis de Sales had it right. He was always the same great guy, always. Today is the day for us to count our blessings, that Jim Whelan was a part of our lives and that we had the honor to be a part of his life. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Roberts. Mayor Don Guardian said Jim was a big brother to him when he entered the fraternity of Atlantic City mayors. While they certainly didn't always agree on the best path forward to Atlantic City, Jim always said he knew Mayor Guardian was doing what he thought was right, even if it wasn't what Jim thought, and we always knew what Jim thought. Thank you to Mayor Guardian and his office to helping put this great event together. Please welcome Mayor Don Guardian of Atlantic City.
Family and friends of Jim, thank you for coming together as we remember a man who dedicated his life to public service. Jim was a Philly kid who summered with his family at the Jersey Shore right here in the inlet in Atlantic City. He grew to love this boardwalk, the beach, and the ocean. He was a lifeguard with our beach patrol for 19 years, a world-class swimmer, returned after college as a teacher, a swim coach, a councilman, a mayor, an assemblyman, and a senator. But those were just the jobs that he had from the time he was born on November 8th in 48 till 3 weeks ago, August 22nd, when he died. More important is the fact that the whale stood tall in AC, and it had nothing to do with his physical height, but with the content of his character. He made decisions that were right for the city that he loved. What was important is how he spent, if my math is correct, 593,592 hours on this earth. That's how you measure a man's worth. Former Beach Patrol Chiefs Levy and Aloise stopped counting after Jim saved 1,000 victims from drowning over the 19 years on the Beach Patrol. 1,000 people lived because of Jim. And on a single day in the 1970s, Bob Levy and Jim Whelan saved 87 people in a single day. 900, yeah, of course. In over 36 years, as he taught 925 kids to swim, he knew that they would be safe when they were in the water. Walking in his shoes, I can tell you this, a few hundred people bumped into him on the sidewalk or came up into the mayor's office unannounced, and he helped them find a job, a place to stay, a bed in a rehab, driving them to the mission on a code blue night, or frustrated with the entire bureaucracy, gave him a couple of bucks for a sandwich. For me, it was Jim taking me under his wing, not caring that we're in opposing political parties, like a big brother when I became mayor, and showing me the ropes behind the scenes. Lots of elected officials are politicians, but few are statesmen. The whale was a statesman. He made the right decision, even when they were not popular, even when they cost him votes at election, and even when he lost the election. But this statement's legacy is the new convention center, the shops at the Walk, the Borgata Surf Stadium, the beautiful housing that is now part of the inlet he once vacationed in. That's what Jim did with his 593,952 hours on this earth. Jim was looking forward to January of the coming year to enjoy his golden years, not feeling bad that he's missing somebody's 50th anniversary or Boy Scout camporee. That was not to be. Whale loved this city, and we and a generation to come will be better because of him. I pray that time will heal the loss for Kathy and Richie, his sisters, and all that loved him. And I hope as time passes, the good times you shared with Jim will comfort you. Jim, good night. May your soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Mayor Gordon. Jim's love of Stockton University knew no bounds. He was the biggest proponent of bringing Stockton to Atlantic City than anyone. In Dr. Harvey Kesselman, Jim knew he had an ally. When Dr. Kesselman had already committed to joining another university at the time the Stockton presidency became available, I think Jim was prepared to call every board member at the University of Southern Maine to tell them, no, you're not getting Harvey. Just down the street, the Stockton University project will anchor the Chelsea neighborhood just as Jim intended it to. Please welcome Dr. Harvey Kesselman.
Good afternoon. 4 months ago, I stood side by side with my friend, Senator Jim Whelan, right here at Stockton's first commencement ceremony at Boardwalk Hall. It was a truly amazing day. We could hardly believe our eyes, the sight of this arena filled with such energy and excitement. Jim was a cherished friend of the Stockton community, and we could think of no person we wanted more to share in that historic moment. The senator delivered an inspiring speech, leaving us with this encouragement. "Don't be afraid to make mistakes," he said. "You're going to make some, but keep going. Push a little bit further. You'll get it right." At the conclusion of his address, we presented him with our Distinguished Service Award. It was a very, very proud moment in the history of Stockton University. Never in a million years would I have imagined that just 4 months later, I'd be standing here again on this platform at Boardwalk Hall talking about my friend instead of being with him. When I first heard of his passing, I thought to myself, there are no words. I simply had no words to express the shock, no words to communicate the profound feeling of loss I shared with the entire Stockton community. Those who know me would suggest that it is a rare moment when I am at a loss for words. But this was truly such a time. As I began to come to grips with the moment, the words came. Words such as humble and loyal, steady and thoughtful, caring and sensitive, giving and warm, fair and honest. And I could go on, for these words accurately portray a man so loved by so many. But today I stand before you with only one word that I believe best describes the senator and our friend, and that word is honorable. Jim Whelan touched the lives of so many people, but students touched his life the most. It has been said that no man stands so tall as when he stoops to help a child. This is so fitting for our dear senator, as he was a man of great physical stature and of great character. The students of Atlantic City had such a tremendous affinity for their beloved teacher. Jim not only taught them to swim, but to trust, to have courage, to believe in themselves. Jim Whelan was an honorable man. In his decades of public service, Jim practiced the same principles of hard work and diligence that he instilled in his students. One of the qualities I admired most about Jim was that he never backed away from a challenge. He focused on accomplishing things, on getting things done, and he did so without posturing. You see, he understood that a man's character is the key to his success. Author Susie Kassem proclaims, there are 3 marks of an honorable man: selflessness, humility, and truthfulness. Well, I'm here to proclaim that Jim's life, Jim's legacy, is the sum total of all 3. Again, I say Jim Whelan was an honorable man. On behalf of the entire Stockton community, we extend our heartfelt condolences to Kathy and the Whelan family. Kathy, it's been my honor to pay tribute to your husband today. For many years, I've had the privilege of being in his company. I've had the opportunity to learn from him and to work with him. I've had the honor of calling him my friend. I'm going to miss Jim Whelan. We are all going to miss Jim Whelan, for he is our honorable man. May he rest in perfect peace.
Thank you, Harvey. Nothing gave Jim Whelan more pride than watching the Hard Rock Casino announce they're finally coming to Atlantic City. It was only a beat by having a local guy at the helm. Jim bothered Jim Allen for years about Atlantic City. Now they're here thanks to Jim's persistence and hard work. Thank you, Jim Allen and Hard Rock, for making Senator Whelan's dream come true. I'm proud to welcome the President and CEO of Hard Rock International, Jim Allen.
Thank you. To the Whelan family, truly an honor to be able to say a few words in remembrance of Senator Whelan. I don't think it was ever a bother. I think it was an honor when Senator Whelan continued his relentless efforts to talk about the opportunity that we could create together by bringing our company and our brand back to Atlantic City. But the reality is, I actually knew Senator Whelan back from the middle '80s, when he was actually a local city council representative. And I was president of the local purchasing association, and I had called numerous elected officials in town, and frankly, I did not get a response. But Senator Whelan, I said, would you come to one of our, at the time, Congressman or Councilman Whelan, would you come to one of our events? He said, sure. Tell me what it's about. He said, it's about the industry coming together to try to benefit Atlantic City. And that was probably back in 1985 or 86, give or take. And it's during that period, and ever since, Jim was a friend. Hard Rock had talked about coming to Atlantic City many times. It is true that it would have never happened if it wasn't for Senator Whelan's persistence. When we made the announcement, it was a joyous day. And at that particular time, for over 10 years, it was virtually nothing but negative information, business declines on Atlantic City. Within 30 days after that announcement, we had over 408 million media impressions. And every one of those were positive in nature. And now we certainly have seen a lot of additional commitments coming back into Atlantic City. We're committed to spend over $500 million, create thousands of jobs. And please make no mistake, that would have never happened if it wasn't for Senator Jim Whelan. In closing, I'm always fascinated when people pass. And certainly by the remarks that have already been stated, and I'm sure many to come, nobody ever says that person was a no-good SOB, right? Never. But in this particular case, truly a great man, Jim Whelan, has left us. The thing that I was always so impressed with was you wouldn't know Jim was a Democrat. You wouldn't know that he ran as an independent. Our business is in 75 countries around the world, and we deal with a lot of politicians. And when you talk about honesty and integrity and telling you what's real, that's a quality that Senator Whelan had that, frankly, I don't know any other politician that will ever be able to live up to that. I thank you once again, and obviously our condolences go out to the Whelan family. Thank you.
Thank you. They were competitors once, but on the other side became friends. Politics was politics with Jim. When it was over, the grudges never lasted. Even though Jim and Sonny McCullough did their battles across party lines, they knew they could count on each other for honest leadership. I am pleased to welcome Egg Harbor Township's Mayor, Sonny McCullough.
Thank you. I just want to thank the legislative team that you put together and to the Whelan family for this invitation to permit me to be part of the ceremony. I looked at the program today and I noticed that it said former congressman, former ambassador, former senator, former this and former that, but under my name it didn't say former senator, and it would have been apropos since Jim Whelan was responsible for making me a former senator. I'll tell you one funny story. Jim and I met when I volunteered for the Round the Island Swim, and he was an extraordinary athlete. And we became friends at that time. And Then I was appointed to be a senator by the Republican Party after Senator Gormley stepped aside. One funny story that came out of that election, and by the way, one of the things I disliked the most was when you get to this level, you hire consultants. And the consultants, they don't care about the other candidate. They only care about who's going to win and what their reputation is about. And I can tell you, the last 10 days of my campaign, I actually fired the consultant because I would not allow him to say things he wanted to say about my friend Jim Whelan. And I don't think anybody during those campaigns ever heard Jim Whelan say anything nasty and mean about Sonny. And I think all my friends know I did likewise. I would not permit it. But one funny thing did happen. A day and a half after the election was over, I end up on an airplane going to Myrtle Beach, and who's sitting across from me but Jim Whelan? So anyhow, when the plane lands, him and I are chatting, and I say to Jim, listen, you know how much I dislike these consultants, but if I had listened to what the consultant said, I would be still the senator, and you wouldn't be. So he says, well, what do you mean by that? And if you know Jim's sense of humor, it's hard to tickle his funny bone. He doesn't give you a big laugh. So I said, well, what was going to happen was we were going to make thousands and thousands of robocalls. Oh, he goes, okay, what's that all about? I said, well, here's the way the robocall was going to go. And the voice was going to sound like you. Hello, this is Jim Whelan. I'm calling you to ask you to vote for me. I'm running for Senate in the 2nd District. And if you would be so kind to call 4 or 5 of your friends up and ask them to vote for me, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Again, this is Jim Whelan. Hangs up. He goes, well, what's so bad about that? Well, 2 hours later, another phone call to those same thousands of people. Hello, this is Jim Whelan, just calling back to remind you to vote for me and call 4 or 5 of your friends to vote for me. Hangs up. Oh, what's so bad about that? Well, 3 hours later, another phone call comes in. Hey, this is Jim Whelan. Thank you, and I appreciate if you did call and help me get elected. Well, Jim looks at me and he goes, well, that's not so bad. What was so bad about that? Well, the first call was going out at 1 a.m. before election. Second one was going out at 3 a.m. And the last one was going to go out at 5 a.m. How many of those people you think were going to vote for you, Jim? And all I get from him is, ho, 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 ho. Kathy, you know how much I care for you. I'm sorry. I'm proud to be here today, but I'm sorry that I have to be here today. And you know you always have my support, and I do appreciate the fact that I've been given this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. We all know Jim loved being mayor. He took such pride in it. Like any mayor, Jim loved working with the city council most of the time. Here to give a talk about the mayor, Jim Whelan, is former Atlantic City Council President Rosalind Norrell Nance.
Good afternoon. Kathy, Rich, family, and friends. My family wish to extend our deepest condolences. We share your loss, as Jim was a dear friend and confidant. As some of you may remember, Jim and I did not initially get along very well. We both wanted to serve the citizens of Atlantic City, but we couldn't quite agree on how it should be done. So Bobby Levy, who was a longtime friend to both of us, arranged a meeting for us to try to come to some level of cooperation. The meeting took place in Jim's City Hall office, and it really did not go well. As a matter of fact, it was disastrous. Jim starts banging his fist on the desk and hollering about, how am I going to put up with you for a few years? And I said, I'd like to come around the other side of that desk and push you in that chair out the window. However, Bobby was not about to give up on us, so he arranged another meeting, which took place at McGettigan's. I guess he knew that neither Jim nor I could afford to act that childish in public. We started out agreeing that we are just opposites in every way. He was male, I was female. He was white, I was black. He was tall, and I was vertically challenged. But we knew that since he was the mayor and I was the council president, we had to find some way to compromise and better understand each other so we could do the best we could for the citizens and businesses in Atlantic City. We finally hit the nail on the head. We recognized that we were both educators. That proved to be the key to what would develop into a long, trusting, cooperative working relationship and a very special friendship. We decided that when we were considering a project and did not quite see eye to eye, we would list the pros and cons of how the project would benefit the children and youth of Atlantic City and their families. Oh, we considered other things like the finances, the environmental impact, and the reputations and track records of the proposed developers. But what the projects would mean to the children and young people who could not vote to have their voices heard in regard to their future employment, health, and safety was paramount to our decisions. Very few people would have believed that these projects got to go because we had adopted a Bible passage that said, "A little child shall lead them." That cooperative agreement led to changing the policy for ex-offenders who so that they could work in the city, and we would consequently reduce the recidivism among Atlantic City residents and allow parents to have legal employment opportunities. The Hope 6 grant brought affordable housing, jobs, the new Boys and Girls Club, and the James Usry Child Care Center. It also was the impetus for Youth Build, Covenant House, the Surf Baseball Stadium, the Walk shopping area, and selling the H-Track to bringing the Borgata Casino Hotel and the second wave of casino development into Atlantic City. My full-time job was being the director for the Atlantic City Family Centers. Many afternoons, Jim would come just past my office to discuss what was on the table, and when we held our annual community forum to get ideas from the community, Jim not only came to bring greetings, he led one of the focus groups and then would encourage me to write grants that would fund our grandparents raising grandchildren support group, our home buyers seminars, and financial management programs. In fact, he stopped by so often that one little boy was quite confused about our relationship. My husband Nelson stopped by the office one day, and I walked him to the car when he was leaving. He gave me a quick buzz kiss, and back into the office I went. A little while later, the after-school teacher brought a little first grader who was hysterically crying and saying that he was really mad at Miss Roz. So I asked him, "Why on earth are you so angry with me?" He said, "I know who you are. I saw you on TV and I saw what you did, and I'm telling my mommy never to vote for you again. You're Mayor Whelan's wife, and when I was coming in the building, I saw you cheating on him with that man." I could not convince or console him, so I called Jim to tell him about the dilemma I had at the center. Now, at first, all he could do was laugh. So when he stopped uncontrollably laughing, he did come to the center, and we explained to the little boy that we were really just very good friends. And the other man was really my husband. He said to Jim, "But you're a guy, and Miss Roz is a girl." I left the boy with Jim and let him explain how boys and girls could be good friends. A few weeks later, a little girl from Africa enrolled in our center, and some boys were teasing her about her accent. The little boy told them, "It's not nice to tease people, and Mayor Whelan said it's a really good idea to have a girl for a good friend." So another great lesson was learned by a little boy and taught by a man who knew the value of treating women well. Jim's love and concern for children and youth was evident in the many ways he spent his time and energy. Teaching swimming, attending high school and college basketball games, just so the kid would know that he was there and he was proud of their accomplishments. That was a part of Jim's heart and soul and the essence of Jim Whelan. It was part of the reason he was such a good and splendid public servant. It is the part I will always remember. Since I have shared so much about Jim's relationship with children, I'm going to close with a quote from one of my favorite children's books. At one point, Winnie the Pooh once said to his best friend Tigger, "If the day ever comes when we cannot be together, put me in your heart and I'll be with you forever." That is exactly where Jim will remain, in my heart, and I'm sure he'll live eternally in your heart as well.
Thank you. Nothing gave Jim more pride than watching the students grow up. How could you grow up in Atlantic City and not know how to swim? Jim thought that was a sin. He loved being a teacher, and he loved the Atlantic City School District. Here to give us more insight, Jim the teacher, is Atlantic City Education Association President, Marcia Genova.
Good afternoon, and it is certainly my honor to be here to share a few memories with you that I have of Jim Whelan. My first memory of Jim was when I was a teacher at the New Jersey Avenue School, and Jim was mayor of Atlantic City. And one day, I looked up at my classroom door, and there was standing Jim Whelan. And he came up to me and shook my hand and said, "Ms. Genova, I'm Jim Whelan, mayor of Atlantic City," and he pointed to one of my students. And he said, "How is he doing? Is he doing okay? Is he doing his work? Is he behaving?" And I said, "Yes, he's doing a very good job. He's making progress." And he said, "Oh, I am so glad to hear that. But please, Ms. Genova, if you have any problems with him, please let me know. He is a friend of mine." And he left, and I looked at my student. I said, "So you know Jim Whelan?" He said, "Yes, he is a very good friend of mine." And it really touched me because Jim took time out of a busy day to come and check on one of my students. I'm sure he was not the only one that he came to check on. He really cared about the children in Atlantic City. Then in 2002, Jim came back to the classroom. He became a swimming teacher again, and I was his union president, and I would go out to the different buildings. And every time I saw Jim, whether it was at the Uptown School Complex or at the Dr. Martin Luther King School Complex, he was always actively engaged, whether it was in the hallway when the children were in transition, from the locker room to the pool, and I even had the opportunity to see him in the pool, and it was just amazing to watch him. He called the children by his names, and he was just so compassionate in whatever he did. And then when he became a politician again, I had encounters with him, and even when I didn't agree with him, and I would tell him when I agreed with him, and I would tell him when I didn't agree with him. And even when I got angry with him once, he treated me with the utmost respect, and he explained to me why he voted the way he did. And even though I did not agree with him, I respected the fact that, number one, he was so respectful, and he really believed that he voted the right way, and I really respected that. One of my last encounters with Jim was when both the City of Atlantic City and the Atlantic City School District were enduring financial problems. And I, along with one of my fellow ACEA officers and some NJEA staff members, we met with Jim, along with some other politicians, and we asked him for help to get more funding for the Atlantic City School District. And Jim said, "Yes, of course, I want more funding. And he explained some obstacles he had. And then he looked me straight in the eye and he said, but Marcia, you're at the negotiations table and you're going to have to give something up. And I knew he was right. And I said, yes, Jim, I know. And he knew that that was going to be something that wasn't easy, but we did make concessions at the table. And the very last time I saw Jim, he said, Madam President, you did the right thing. And that meant a lot to me. And I will always remember Jim as such a compassionate person. He was so compassionate in everything he did, whether it was as a teacher, a lifeguard, a politician, and a family member. So I do wish my condolences to his family, and I'm really going to miss Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. When you talk about high school basketball in this state, you can't do it without talking about Hall of Fame coach Bob Hurley. Jim, Bob, Rafferty, and George Bressel loved their time together. Jim loved high school basketball, and he loved the close friendship with Coach Hurley. Please welcome Coach Bob Hurley.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. I believe I'm the North Jersey representative here. I'm trying to, bridge the gap between New York City and Philadelphia, and this is extremely difficult. We have no interpreter here for me right now, so please, I'm very nervous, and bear with me because, as was said, Jim and I developed a friendship back about 30 years ago, and I brought my high school team here in Christmas of 1986. We played in the Seagull Classic, and while we were here, we practiced one day in one of the rec centers, and Jim was our host, and he came up to me during practice, and it was our day off, so after we were done, we weren't really sure what we were going to do with the kids the rest of the day. So he suggested that we bring the kids in the pool and let them go swimming after practice. So I said to the kids, if we have a good practice, I'm going to let everybody go swimming. And Jim told the story that as soon as practice was done, everybody ran in and that they sat on the edge of the pool. And Jim said to them, you kids can all get in the pool right now. And nobody moved. And he said it wasn't until I come in and I gave them permission to get in the pool that most of the kids went in, but not everybody, because there was still about 4 or 5 that didn't know how to swim. And one of those kids was our best basketball player, this big, strong kid named Jerry Walker. And Jim took him in the pool and started working with him. And as the many kids in Atlantic City that Jim knew about and worked with over his years here as a teacher and as involved in government, he took Jerry and he worked with Jerry. 1 year went by and we went and played in a tournament in Hawaii. And in the tournament in Hawaii, Jerry Walker went into the Pacific Ocean and swam for the first time in an ocean because he had never gone to the Atlantic Ocean living in Jersey City. So the kids that, I have been fortunate enough to coach had an opportunity to do things that, were first time in many cases. And from that tournament, Jim and Raph, George, Alan, the guys that used to be the basketball part of Jim's life, they came to me after the tournament, and we won the tournament. We beat Chris Corsiani, who's a great player played at NC State. We beat his team in a championship game. And the crowd, because we had all young kids, it became an Atlantic City, it was like a home game for us. We were so appreciative. And then the Seagull Classic began inviting us down to play. And we would come down every year to play. The same guys, Jimmy and Raph and George, we would get together and have dinner the night before the game. They'd sit behind the bench, and we would connect. Over the course of the years, countless times, Raph and Jimmy came to see our games. Jim became the official recruiter for Philadelphia for St. Anthony's. And because of his Temple background and also his friendship at Lafayette with Fran, we wound up having kids always being recruited by those schools. And I know he is extremely proud that this year's captain at Temple, Josh Brown, is one of those kids that he called on years back, and he's going to have a big impact. However, he wasn't really a basketball person. all right? He was definitely a guy who was a swimmer who really loved basketball. And Raf and he admitted to me after years that after watching us play down here several years, won a couple of tournaments, we were ranked #1 in the country. My son Bobby, who went on to Duke University, both of them, in evaluating him, they really liked him. They thought he was scrappy, and they thought he could probably get a college scholarship. And so from that point on, over the years, they would ask me first what do I think about a player before they would do any of the evaluations. I'd really like to thank the family for giving me this opportunity to come down here today. He was a wonderful man. Last May, we lost Raf to lose Jimmy in August. My high school team no longer exists, so a big part of my basketball world is gone, but we'll still treasure all the memories we've had. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Coach Early. Jim was a mentor to many, but Damon Tyner's father, the legendary Hank Tyner, was a mentor to Jim. A former two-time running for legislature, former judge, and now our Atlantic County prosecutor, Damon Tyner was always there to have Jim's back. They formed a friendship that lasted a lifetime. Nothing made Jim happier than to see Damon become a judge and ultimately as our prosecutor. Please welcome Atlantic County Prosecutor Damon Tyner.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to share some memories of Jim. Kathy, Richie, to the family, you guys have been so supportive of me in saying how much I meant to all of you and to Jim, but he meant the world to my family right back. So like countless kids in Atlantic City, I met Jim at the pool at the Westside Complex, which is now known as the Dr. Martin Luther King Complex, back in 1977 or so. So that's 40 years ago for me. That's a 40-year friendship. And from that initial meeting, he became a constant in my life, and little did I know that our relationship would evolve from teacher-student to political mentor to friends. When Jim ran for city council along with my father Hank and Arnie Orsatti, I played the role in their very first campaign commercial as the kid whose future lay in their hands. Little did I know at that time how much of a role he would have on my future. When he coached me into running with him for the Assembly back in 2005, he counseled me on the finer points of public service that I hadn't previously considered. I soon learned that Jim and I shared a passion for history, particularly the history of Atlantic City and the people who make it so. We had this macabre hobby, you might say, shared only probably by other public officials or lawyers, of reading the obituaries, or as Jim would call it, the Irish news. Read it first thing in the morning, and if there was someone who had an obscure relationship to someone more prominent, we would make sure to inform the other because it was very important to him to pay respect to the family. If you were to check most funeral registration books in this area, I would guarantee you that Jim Whelan's name is at or near the top of every single one. He would get there first to pay his respects and offer his assistance. So I had asked him about this once, and he told me that two people influenced his practice in this regard. The first was my father, and then his longtime assistant, the late Ketty Johnson. He said when he first ran for office with Hank and Arnie, Speaker Roberts, they didn't knock doors. They campaigned at bars and funerals. According to Jim and my father's logic, if a person showed you respect in life, then you must show their family the respect you had for that person when they passed away. Based upon today's attendance, it's clear and evident that we had an overwhelming respect for Jim Whelan. When he first became mayor, Kitty ran into his office one morning and berated him. She said, "What are you doing here? You're not at the Wilson funeral." He said, "Who?" She showed him the obituary, and he said, "I don't know who this person is." She said, "Read it. He worked in the Public Works Department for the city for 35 years. He dedicated a major part of his life to this city. You owe it to him and his family to show him that respect." So Jim went to the funeral, and of course he knew everybody there, and they were forever grateful for his attendance. Since I got the message that Jim passed away, I've had this empty, unresolved feeling because he was my go-to guy to talk about someone's passing or their legacy. And I feel like calling him up and saying, Jim Whelan passed away. Can you believe this? And I don't think that's ever going to go away. Many of us had a chance to appreciate Jim's competitive spirit. And he had a saying, in for a penny, in for a pound. It was indicative of everything he did. He did it full throttle with maximum effort. He didn't give up on something if it became harder than he originally anticipated. He saw it through to the end. When we ran for office together, we knocked on a ton of doors, talking like 15,000 doors. And you learn a lot about a person when you're campaigning together. He was relentless. He would get out of school at 3 o'clock and get a head start on me. You know, I was working as a lawyer, I had a family, I had kids to get home from school. Jim would start out before me every single time. So I finally figured out how to level the playing field. On the weekend, he and Kathy would go ride horses. So I knew that would take up a great period of his time, and I would get out there and I would start. Well, little did I know, if I knocked 300 doors that weekend, Jim had already called and found out how many doors I knocked, and he'd go out and knock 325. That was just Jim. But besides the competitiveness, I got a chance to observe how he interacted with people. There wasn't a town in this county, from Buena Vista Township to Brigantine, from Hamilton to Longport, and certainly not Atlantic City, where we could go and he didn't have a connection to someone. Even when someone disagreed with him or something he did, he would find common ground with them on another issue before he left their company. It was so uncanny. Although he knew some people would never support him on anything, for whatever reason, he never ran from an opportunity to win them over. So I've been hearing today, and I certainly read an article that stated that Jim's legacy was the Atlantic City skyline and the connector tunnel and all these other tangible items. But in my opinion, you need only to look at Jim's incomparable dedication to the children of Atlantic City. He was invested in our success, and I say our because I was certainly one of them, as I was a student in 1977, 78, and learned how to swim, although he always reminded me that my wife, Nicole, was a better student. Always. As a former athlete, he related to athletes naturally, and he always wanted to help them out. But it didn't matter. You just had to be a kid, and Jim took an interest in you and your success. About 15 years ago, I was in my office, and he called me, and he said, you know, do you know a particular person? And I said, no, they were behind me, but I'm pretty sure I know their family. He said, well, she's a semester away from graduating college. I'm calling you and 4 others to get her over the finish line. He did this with different kids over the years, and their part of the deal was that they would have to come and find me, introduce themselves, thank me for my support, and then tell me what they hoped to achieve. Most importantly, he encouraged them to repay the favor for someone else one day. The children of Atlantic City, the ones that he helped, he was among their biggest advocates. And this is truly Jim's legacy. And out of all of Jim's accomplishments, swimming around Absecon Island, councilman, 3-term mayor, assemblyman, senator, and we heard it here, surviving Atlantic City politics without getting indicted, perhaps his greatest accomplishment was shedding a label, Shooby. Never in the history of Atlantic County has anyone from outside the boundaries of this county been more accepted and embraced as our own than Jim Whelan. It's almost as if the sand and salt water seeped into his veins during that swim around the island or sharing that lifeguard stand with Chief Levy. Maybe it's because he didn't allow labels or stereotypes to guide his path in life. For instance, it's been said that the most segregated places in America are churches and barbershops. That didn't apply to Jim. He felt equally comfortable whether he was at Second Baptist Church or whether he was at St. Michael's Roman Catholic Church, whether he was at Omar and Abdullah's barbershop or whether he was at Manny Aponte's barbershop. He was at home. He didn't permit labels to interfere with his life's work, which was ultimately understanding the plight of another so that he could help improve their circumstances. In the words of Rudyard Kipling, Jim could walk with kings, but he never, ever lost the common touch. As a senator for our district, he was instrumental in the governor nominating me to become an administrative law judge, a superior court judge, and now the Atlantic County prosecutor. And during this process, you have to make phone calls to the various senators and of the Judiciary Committee and the leadership, and you solicit their support. Invariably, no matter who I called, whether a Democrat or a Republican, they would return my call and say the following: if you're all right with Jim Whelan, then you're all right with me. I treasure the many lessons that I learned from my friend Jim, and I value our relationship. On behalf of the many generations of children that he taught and helped, those that maybe can't thank you themselves, Kathy, I want to thank you, Richie, and the rest of his family for sharing him with us. There's certainly a private cost to public service. Behind every person that gives of themselves to help our society is a family who sacrifices as well. There are missed dinners and missed family events which can't be replaced. But through your understanding and acceptance of his service, we are forever grateful for your support of his efforts to make our region better. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Damon. At this time, please welcome Dr. David Smith, a close friend of Jim, who will sing The Old Man in honor of our friend Jim Whelan.
Kathy, thank you for the great honor of participating in these services. Over the past couple weeks, we've heard many wonderful things that have all been true about Jim Whelan. But his greatest legacy can be seen in the way he cared for you. There has never been a more caring, loving, devoted spouse than you had with Jim. And that is his greatest honor. The song I'm going to sing would be a favorite of Jim's. It's an Irish ballad of a son singing to his father at the funeral. And to Rich and to all the thousands of young people that Jim was a father figure to, these words will have great meaning. The tears have all been shed now. We've said our last goodbye. His soul's been blessed and laid to rest, and it's now I feel alone. He was more than just a father, a teacher, my best friend. He can still be heard in the tunes we shared when I play them on my own. And I never will forget him, for he made me what I am. Though he may be gone, memories linger on, and I miss him, the old man. As a boy, he'd take me walking by mountains, fields, and streams, and show me things not known to kings, just secrets between him and me. Like the color of the pheasant as he rises in the dawn, and how to fish and make a wish down by the holly tree. And I never will forget him, for he made me what I am. Though he may be gone, memories linger on, and I miss him, the old man. I thought he'd live forever. He seemed so big and strong. But minutes fly and the years go by for a father and a son. And suddenly, when it happened, there was so much left unsaid. No second chance to tell him thanks for all the things he'd done. and I never will forget him, for he made me what I am. Though he may be gone, memories linger on, and I miss him, the old man. God bless you, Jim Whelan.
Please rise as we welcome the Reverend Colin Days of the Second Baptist Church in Atlantic City to offer a closing benediction.
Let us pray. God of grace and God of mercy, as we prepare to depart from this place and this occasion, we pause to say thank you. We thank you for the life of Jim. We thank you for the legacy that he's left, the wonderful life that he's lived. We pray for his family, that you bless them with the declaration of the psalmist, that weeping may endure through the night, but joy comes in the morning. Bless them with the promise of Jesus, that I will never leave you, nor will I forsake you. And as we depart this place, let us not leave with a heart of mourning or void in our heart, but bless us with the patience of Jim. Bless us with the peace of Jim. Bless us with his commitment to community. Bless us with his fierce anger against injustice and inequality. Bless us with a passion for people. Bless us, O God, that we may take the mantle of leadership now and move on and continue the work, continue the legacy, that we can touch people, make this place a better place, make this city a better city, and by his example, make ourselves a better people. In your name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Everyone can sit for just a moment. On behalf of the Whelan family, myself, and our legislative office, we sincerely thank you for joining us today. The remembrance isn't over yet, though. The Jim Whelan Memorial Foundation invites you to join us at the Irish Pub on St. James Place for an Irish wake in Whelan's honor. Those who have parked car can leave their cars in the Boardwalk Hall garage until 5 p.m. If you wish to drive the Irish Pub, there is plenty of parking on St. James Place and New York Avenue. Those who wish to leave their cars here can get a ride to the pub from Atlantic City Jitneys. They are parked on Mississippi Avenue. Leave Boardwalk Hall and exit to the left on the boardwalk, and Mississippi Avenue is the first street on the left. There will also be boardwalk trams that will take you down to the boardwalk. Just one thing, I asked the family's going to exit first, and then everybody else can follow them, if you will. Once again, thank you for joining us today in the honor of the life of Jim Whelan. We hope to see you at the Irish Pub. Thank you.